I think there are a lot of people who just want all-day music.
And
but not the underground type, and I'm very much against putting underground music on Radio 1 because it shows in the ratings to start off with. As soon as you put anything like that on, the ratings drop remarkably.
Well, you have to take into consideration there the hour as well. I agree.
I think you could put it on at any time, and I think it would get a low audience because it's like it's the equivalent, to my way of thinking. It's jazz. Jazz has a very staunch and but limited audience, as classical music doesn't. I think pop music and commercial radio go hand in hand because I think pop music with commercials is the ideal form of broadcasting. Radio 1 to work on as a station is immensely difficult because you really do have to rely on your own ability. I mean, I have to write 10 to 15 new jokes every morning, things and this sort of thing. Therefore, it's quite tricky.
Yes.
And therefore, I think it's more difficult as a disc jockey to work on Radio 1 for the sort of radio we're doing. A commercial radio disc jockey can, in America at any rate now, he says virtually nothing.
There's no denying Tony Blackburn's fluency, nor his honesty. The only question is whether he isn't defending the indefensible. Here, for instance, is another DJ whose approach is diametrically opposed to Blackburn's cheerful commercial realism. Pete Drummond, despite a background including the pirate radio stations from whose condemned loins Radio 1 sprang, holds the view that it's the duty of the DJ to present what appears to him worthwhile. He does so for an hour every Sunday night to a small but very loyal audience. He explained first how he saw his job.
Some people have suggested that, in fact, disc jockeys need not exist, and you could just have music back-to-back, sort of 8 or 10 records, one after the other, and then an announcement in between, which may satisfy some people. But I think some people do enjoy hearing the sound of a voice. There is a contact there, as opposed to just a machine sitting in the living room or the kitchen, wherever, which is pumping music out, without any sort of contact with what is happening at that precise moment somewhere else, and something they can relate to another human being, as it were.
But one thing I rather like about your presentation is that you don't go in, as many disc jockeys do, usually in the shallower seas of pop music, for this tremendous personality cult, which seems to suggest that the only reason the music is there is to promote their own lovely selves and imprint their image on the audience's mind.
Yes, this is well, you see, it's a very competitive field, the radio disc jockey field. Any sort of show business, I suppose, is very competitive, and the thing behind everybody's mind is, if I don't impregnate myself in people's minds, then they're going to forget about me and they're going to get somebody else who could perhaps do this job better than I do.
What about the terrible tricks that you find coming from most DJs, in particular that playing, feeling that the opening bars of a record are of no value except to talk over because it makes one's voice sound somehow more interesting, or joining in with the songs? I mean, something that, however banal the song, it was recorded to be listened to as it is, and the DJs come trampling over the end of it.
So I find it very irritating too, because obviously somebody spent a lot of time in instrumentalizing the first part or the last part of a song, and presumably it isn't completely divorced from the rest of the song, and they didn't make it just so we could talk over it as disc jockeys. But I think it comes from the idea of continuity, of endless patter, you see, where you're talking, and all of a sudden as you're talking, so a record comes in, and you carry on talking, and the whole thing just sort of flows along in one great ball of sound with no gap at all. Whereas, you'll find the complete opposite on this channel, where there'll be 2 or 3 seconds of silence is quite usual.
Tony Blackburn and Pete Drummond hold, therefore, diametrically opposed views as to their function as disc jockeys. But they are, after all, executants. They're employed because they're both seen as part of what Radio 1 is all about. To try and discover its broader aims and policies, I talked to Mark White, head of Radio 1. Whether, I asked him, restrictions which prevented the channel from becoming a true pop network. Why, for example, does it join up on weeknights with Radio 2 at around 7 o'clock, exactly the time, I'd have thought, when young people, its potential audience, are arriving home?
The only reason we stop when we do, which is 7 o'clock on weekdays and a little bit later on Saturdays and Sundays, is simply and truthfully because we have run out of the resources that we need to make music and programs for Radio 1. And the most important resource, of course, is needle time. In other words, the use of commercial gramophone records, which, as you, I'm sure, know, is rationed pretty severely to the BBC. We have about 34 hours a week of needle time on Radio 1. In certain other areas, I think you will agree, you can make quite good music, popular music I'm talking about, in your own studios. But Radio 1, as our pop station, is primarily about records. 2/3 of what we broadcast, even on Radio 1, we do make in our own studios. But by the time we come to 7 o'clock on weekdays, we have literally run out of our resources. Now, you're quite right when you say that it's about 7 o'clock in the evening, this is when you would expect the young people to be coming home, and this is perfectly true. It is all tied up with the exact nature of the audience that we're getting at. It would be silly to broadcast progressive pop, obviously, in the middle of the morning and the middle of the afternoon, when we know that our Radio 1 audience is mostly housewives. There may be some young housewives, some not so young housewives, but the vast majority of people who like, if you like, the sort of John Peel, Top Gear kind of music, are clearly not available to listen. Our concept of Radio 1 is that it is important for us to cater for this audience because it is the majority audience, and the minority of people who want the sort of music that I think you're talking about are fairly severely rationed. Now, if we were able to broadcast more hours, we would be filling the need that those people have for this kind of music. At the moment, we're putting out about 9 hours a week of that sort of music. I just wish and hope that we can get more as soon as possible and expand the whole network.
But there are other sorts of music, jazz, for instance. It seems to me that jazz these days on radio is treated in such a way as to suggest that the BBC tended to feel its audience was very much brighter than the audience for pop music.
Oh dear, I wouldn't have thought so. I'm sorry if that's what you feel about it, because I would have thought that, for instance, John Peel's Top Gear, that Sounds of the 70s, Mondays to Fridays, Pete Drummond show on Sunday evenings, I would have thought that these treated pop, on the whole, as though the audience were just as intelligent as the jazz audience.
Yes, they treat the deep end of pop, which in a way is not so dissimilar from certain aspects of modern jazz. Neither of them my favourite music, but they're treated in this way. But whereas jazz, right the way through, whether they're playing Armstrong Hot 5 or Morton or blues singers or right through to the avant-garde, treats the whole spectrum as if the audience who had tended to listen to jazz were better educated, able to understand longer words and so on.
No, I don't think so, George. I think it's simply that jazz is older, it's been going much longer, it's dragged itself up by its own bootstraps out of the gutter that it was born in, as you will be the first to agree. Pop, in the sense of being serious and worthwhile music, hasn't been going anything like that long.
Yet I still feel personally that most of the shows on Radio 1 are served up one after the other like identical bowls of breakfast cereals. I put this to Mark, expecting some opposition, but rather to my surprise, he agreed with me.
I wouldn't disagree with you at all that Radio 1 provides, to use your phrase, helping after helping of the same pudding, or whatever it was you said. I mean, the point of disagreement between us really is that I see doing precisely that as the job that Radio 1 is supposed to do, and you regret the necessity, if you like to put it that way, for a radio station to do that. Yet it happens, of course, all over the world, doesn't it?
But I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I think the BBC is in a unique position of not having to do anything, or if it's been told to do it, then the people that have told it are absolutely wrong, I think.
But George, one of the things which the BBC has been criticised for, possibly more than anything else I can think of over the years, is a tendency to tell the public, who after all keep us in our jobs by paying the licence fee, what they should do and what they shouldn't do, and what they should have and what they shouldn't have. We're always being accused of trying to educate people. There is nothing, no attempt is made on Radio 1 to educate people.
No, it isn't.